Dressed in what looked like thrift store finds, she endured 3 hours of silent judgment from the first-class cabin in seat 12A. Then, the engines went silent, the plane began to fall, and the woman they dismissed as a nobody rose to her feet and announced a military call sign that would change everything. The world inside that metal tube, plummeting toward the earth, was about to learn a lesson it would never forget. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. Now back to our story. Leah Vance stood in the priority boarding line for Flight 815 at Chicago O'Hare, a sea of polished leather shoes and designer handbags swirling around her. In her hand, she clutched a boarding pass, the paper already soft and worn from her anxious grip. She looked utterly out of place, a faded photograph in a gallery of vibrant portraits. Her jeans were clean but worn thin at the knees, the cuff on her right leg showing a subtle fray. Her olive-drab jacket had seen better decades, its color muted by sun and countless washings. Her dark hair, pulled back in a severe no-nonsense tie, framed a face that was calm and unreadable. The canvas duffel bag slung over her shoulder looked like it had been through a war, and in a way it had. No one gave her a second look, except to dismiss her. Behind her, two tech executives in razor-sharp suits discussed their latest venture capital funding with booming voices. Ahead, a family adorned in matching luxury resort wear chattered about their ski trip in Aspen. Leah was just background noise, a ghost in the terminal. The gate agent, a young man named Kenji, whose name tag was slightly crooked, called for her boarding group. Leah stepped forward, the scent of expensive perfume from the woman in front of her making her nose twitch. She handed over her pass. Kenji's eyes flickered from the pass to Leah, then back again. A small frown creased his forehead. "Seat 12A, first class," he said, the words hanging in the air like a question. He swiped the pass again, and a small, almost imperceptible beep of confirmation sounded. "Ma'am, is this your ticket?" he asked, lowering his voice slightly, as if trying to save her from some embarrassment. "Yes," Leah replied, her voice quiet but firm. "That's my seat." Kenji, seeing her unwavering gaze, just shrugged and waved her through. "Enjoy your flight." As Leah walked down the jet bridge, she could feel the stairs like physical pressure on her back. A man in a cashmere sweater gave her a look that traveled from her scuffed boots to her faded jacket and ended in a sneer. A woman dripping in diamonds whispered something to her husband, who then glanced at Leah's duffel bag with open disdain. The aisle of the plane was a narrow gauntlet of judgment. "Excuse me," Leah said, her voice polite, to a large man blocking her path. He was wearing a gold watch so bright it seemed to generate its own light. A watch probably worth more than her truck back home. "The main cabin is that way," the man said, gesturing dismissively toward the rear of the plane without even turning to look at her. His name, emblazoned on his briefcase tag, was Harrison Cole. "I know," Leah said, holding up her pass so he could see the seat number. "I'm in 12A. Harrison Cole actually squinted at the ticket as if he couldn't believe his eyes. "First class, huh? Must be your lucky day." He shifted his bulk with a resentful sigh, muttering to his associate, "Guess the airlines are just giving these seats away now." Leah found her window seat and slid in, stowing her duffel under the seat in front of her. The bag was more than just old. It was a tapestry of her life, covered in small, discreet patches. To the casual observer, they were just decorations. But each one, a tiny embroidered lightning bolt, a silver star, a faded blackbird, told a story that would make these people's blood run cold. Her seatmate was already settled in, a woman named Evelyn Sinclair who radiated the kind of brittle elegance that comes from generations of wealth. She eyed Leah's arrival as if a stray dog had wandered into her drawing room. "I do hope you're not a nervous flyer," Mrs. Sinclair stated, her voice as crisp and cold as Arctic air. I simply cannot abide by hysterics when we hit a patch of rough air." Leah offered a small, tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm very comfortable in the air, thank you." Across the aisle, a renowned surgeon, Dr. Julian Croft, was holding court with his colleague, a lawyer named Marcus Thorne. "The problem with the world today," the doctor declared, his voice carrying through the quiet cabin, "is a complete erosion of standards. Look at this. They're letting the riffraff into the premium cabins. It dilutes the entire experience." Thorne nodded sagely. "You're absolutely right, Julian. The exclusivity is gone. It's a shame." Both men cast a meaningful glance in Leah's direction. Their message was crystal clear. The flight attendant, a young woman named Chloe with a perpetually bright but forced smile, began taking pre-departure drink orders. She treated every other passenger like a treasured guest, her voice warm and engaging. When she got to Leah, her smile tightened, becoming a mask of professional duty. "And for you?" she asked, her tone clipped. "Just water, please," Leah said. "Just water?" Chloe's eyebrow arched in surprise. "We have champagne, fresh squeezed orange juice, a selection of wines." "Water is perfect," Leah repeated. Chloe shrugged, the gesture saying more than words ever could. As she walked away, Leah heard her whisper to another attendant, "Seat 12A just wants water. Probably can't believe it's free." At 9:15 a.m., Flight 859, a state-of-the-art Airbus A350, pushed back from the gate and climbed into the clear Chicago sky. As they broke through the cloud layer and leveled off at 39,000 feet, the passengers settled in for the 4-hour flight to New York. Leah stared out the window at the brilliant white carpet of clouds below. It was a view she'd seen more times than she could count, but almost always from a much smaller, much faster, and much, much deadlier cockpit. What none of these people knew, what they couldn't possibly comprehend, was that the quiet woman in the worn-out jacket had logged more flight hours than every single pilot on this aircraft combined. "So," Mrs. Sinclair began, her voice dripping with the kind of condescending curiosity one might use on a peculiar insect, "what is it you do?" "I was in government service," Leah answered, keeping her eyes fixed on the clouds. Mrs. Sinclair let out a short, sharp laugh like the crack of a whip. "Ah, a bureaucrat. How quaint. That certainly explains the ensemble." She gestured vaguely at Leah's jacket. Behind them, Harrison Cole was now loudly detailing his trip. "Flying into LaGuardia to close a 9-figure real estate deal," he boomed, making sure at least 3 rows could hear him. "It's not every day you get to reshape the skyline of a major city." Dr. Croft felt compelled to one-up him. "I'm presenting my latest findings on cellular regeneration at a global symposium. My work is set to revolutionize modern medicine." Marcus Thorne added his own contribution. "And I'm deposing the CEO of a rival tech firm in a massive intellectual property suit. Billions are at stake." They all seemed to be performing for an invisible audience, their accomplishments laid out like offerings. They would occasionally glance at Leah, as if waiting for her to be awestruck, to validate their importance. When she simply pulled a dog-eared paperback from her duffel and began to read, they seemed almost offended by her lack of reaction. "Some people," Mrs. Sinclair sniffed, loud enough for Leah to hear over the hum of the engines, "just have no ambition." Leah ignored them, her focus on the book. It was a dense technical manual on next-generation avionics systems, but she held it angled away from her seatmate, letting her assume it was a cheap novel. 2 hours into the flight, the lunch service began. Chloe moved through the cabin with a stack of elegant leather-bound menus. "Today's choices are a seared duck breast with a cherry reduction or a pan-seared branzino with lemon caper sauce," she announced with a flourish. "For dessert, we have a molten chocolate cake or a classic New York cheesecake." She handed menus to everyone, but when she reached Leah's seat, she paused. "Oh, my apologies," Chloe said, her voice syrupy sweet. "It seems we're one menu short. But I can just tell you the options. Leah looked up, her expression unreadable. It's fine. I'll just have whatever is easiest. Mrs. Sinclair let out a small, almost imperceptible smirk. Some people just aren't used to having choices, she whispered to the man behind her. You can probably guess what happened next. When the meals were served, everyone else received theirs on fine porcelain with heavy silver cutlery and crisp linen napkins. Leah's meal arrived on a plastic tray with a plastic fork wrapped in a paper napkin, the exact same service as the economy cabin. We've all felt that sting of being misjudged, right? But this was on another level. Oh my, Dr. Croft said, feigning sympathy from across the aisle. It appears there's been some sort of mistake with your service. It's fine, Leah said, unwrapping her fork. Harrison Cole chuckled. Maybe that's the easiest option she asked for, the budget meal. The taunts, veiled and overt, continued. These people, cocooned in their wealth and privilege, seemed to be drawing energy from their shared ridicule of her. I'll bet she's never even heard of a Michelin star, Marcus Thorne commented to the doctor. Probably thinks a night out at the Olive Garden is fine dining, Mrs. Sinclair added with a cruel little laugh. Leah ate her food, her face a stoic mask. She'd eaten MREs in the freezing mud of a forward operating base and consumed stale protein bars in the cockpit of a jet pulling 7Gs. This lukewarm chicken was a feast by comparison, but the casual cruelty of her fellow passengers felt uniquely poisonous. As the meal service ended, the comments became more pointed, their voices louder. I can't for the life of me figure out how she afforded this ticket, Dr. Croft mused. Government assistance probably, Thorne shot back. Our tax dollars at work, letting people experience a life they haven't earned. Mrs. Sinclair delivered the final blow. Just look at those boots, scuffed beyond belief. I wouldn't even let my gardener wear those. Leah looked down at the worn leather. They had been a gift from her wingman, Rico, after their first tour together. He'd said they were lucky. He never made it back from their third. The woman's casual insult felt like a desecration of his memory. Her knuckles turned white as she gripped her book, the pages crinkling under the pressure. Chloe came to collect the trays. I do hope that was satisfactory for you, she said to Leah, a smug little smile playing on her lips. I know it's not what the rest of us are having. The other passengers chuckled. Leah finally looked up, her calm gray eyes meeting Chloe's. It was fine, thank you. But inside, a cold fury was building. These people had no idea what real hardship was. They had no concept of sacrifice. At 1:35 p.m., somewhere over Pennsylvania, the lights flickered once, twice. A low chime echoed through the cabin, one Leah had never heard on a commercial flight. Then came the captain's voice, smooth and practiced, but with an undercurrent of tension only she could detect. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Davies. We're just experiencing some minor fluctuations in our electrical systems. Nothing to be alarmed about. Please remain seated while our engineers take a look. Most passengers barely registered it, but Leah's head snapped up from her book. She knew that tone of voice. It was the carefully modulated calm of a professional trying desperately not to reveal how bad things really were. This would be the moment that changed everything. 10 minutes later, the lights flickered again and went out, plunging the cabin into the dim, eerie glow of the emergency lighting. The captain's voice came back, and this time the strain was undeniable. Folks, we have a developing situation. We seem to have lost our primary navigation and communication arrays. We will need to prepare for an emergency landing. A ripple of fear spread through the cabin. Mrs. Sinclair gasped, her hand flying to her pearl necklace. Dr. Croft's face went pale. Harrison Cole stopped his boasting and started fumbling with his phone, searching for a signal that wasn't there. What does that mean? Marcus Thorne demanded to no one in particular. Are we going to crash? A flight attendant tried to calm the rising tide of panic. Please, everyone, remain calm. The pilots are trained for this. Yes, but Leah could see the terror in the attendant's eyes. She recognized the look of someone who was completely out of their depth, facing a problem for which there was no checklist. 15 minutes later, the situation escalated from critical to catastrophic. A loud bang echoed from the right side of the plane, followed by a violent shudder. The captain's voice, now ragged with fear, crackled over the PA. "Mayday, mayday, this is Captain Davies. I need to be honest with you. We have lost all engine power. We have also lost all our electronic systems. It appears to be a coordinated cyber attack affecting multiple aircraft systems. We are flying blind." The cabin erupted into pure pandemonium. Mrs. Sinclair began to shriek, a high, piercing sound of terror. Dr. Croft was muttering prayers under his breath. People were crying, shouting, grabbing for their loved ones. Chloe and the other attendants were just as terrified, their attempts to restore order lost in the chaos. But Leah knew the terrifying truth behind the captain's words. A coordinated cyber attack that could disable redundant systems and kill the engines of an A350 wasn't just a glitch. It was an act of war. And she knew that this plane was now nothing more than a 250-ton glider, and it was falling. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stood. "Ma'am, you have to sit down," Chloe yelled, rushing toward her. "Everyone needs to stay in their seats." "I need to get to the cockpit," Leah said, her voice an island of calm in the storm of panic. "That's impossible. Passengers are not allowed." Leah locked eyes with the terrified flight attendant. "My name is Leah Vance. I am a retired United States Air Force colonel. I have over 7,000 hours of flight time in combat aircraft. I have dealt with total systems failure scenarios before. I can help them." Chloe stared at her, dumbfounded. "You're a pilot?" "I am," Leah confirmed. "And I might be the only person on this plane who knows how to fly without a single computer." From her seat, Mrs. Sinclair let out a hysterical laugh. "Her? She's lying. She's a delusional civil servant." But Chloe saw something in Leah's eyes, a deep, unshakable confidence that defied her simple appearance. The decision she made in that split second would determine the fate of everyone on board. I'll call the captain," Chloe stammered, grabbing the interphone. Her side of the conversation was frantic. "Captain, there's a passenger. She says she's a retired Air Force colonel. Leah Vance." "Yes, sir. She says she can help." "Yes, sir, right away." Chloe hung up the phone, her face a mixture of terror and dawning awe. "He wants to see you now." Leah moved toward the front of the plane, her steps steady even as the aircraft bucked. She followed Chloe into the cockpit. It was a tomb. The vibrant glass displays that normally showed a river of data were black, lifeless voids. Only a few red emergency lights cast ghostly shadows on the faces of Captain Davies and his first officer. They looked like men who had already accepted their deaths. "You're the Air Force colonel?" Captain Davies asked, his voice hollow. "Retired," Leah said, her eyes already scanning the dead instruments. "Give me a sit rep." "It's all gone," the first officer mumbled. "Nav, comms, autopilot, fly-by-wire backups. Even the emergency ram air turbine isn't responding. It's a ghost plane." "Do you have manual control of the flight surfaces?" Leah asked sharply. "Yes," Davies replied. "Hydraulics are still responsive, but we're a glider. We have no idea where we are, how high we are, or where we're going." Leah nodded, her mind already working, processing variables, calculating odds. "I can fix that. Do you have paper charts? Emergency sectional maps?" "In the emergency kit," the first officer said. "They're basic." "Basic is all I need," Leah said, a flicker of the old fire in her eyes. "I can navigate by dead reckoning. It's old school, but it works." The captain looked at her, his skepticism warring with desperation. "Ma'am, with all due respect, this is an Airbus A350 with 3 and 12 souls on board. This isn't a fighter jet." Leah allowed herself a grim smile. "Captain, I've navigated a B-2 Spirit bomber through the most heavily defended airspace on the planet without a single electronic emission. Trust me, I can handle your Airbus." For the next hour, a miracle unfolded in that dark cockpit. Leah, using nothing but a paper map, a compass, and the view out the window, began to piece together their location. She used the sun's position, the curve of a river, the layout of a highway system below. She was painting a picture of the world from 30,000 feet entirely inside her head. Based on the bend in that interstate and the sun's angle, we're approximately 150 miles east of Pittsburgh, she announced. If we bank to a heading of 280 and hold this glide slope, we can make it to John Murtha Cambria County. Airport. It has a long enough runway. But how do we land? The first officer despaired. No radio, no instrument landing system. The tower won't even see us coming. We'll do an unannounced visual approach, Leah stated. It's risky as hell, but it's our only shot. As she worked, her expertise was staggering. She knew the A350 systems better than the men who flew it every day. Her knowledge of emergency protocols was encyclopedic. Her calm was infectious. "Colonel," Captain Davies finally said, his voice filled with a new respect, "what exactly did you fly in the Air Force?" Leah paused her calculations for a beat. "A few different platforms, mostly advanced tactical fighters." "Which ones?" the first officer pressed, his curiosity overriding his fear. "The F-22 Raptor, and some experimental craft that are still classified." The two commercial pilots just stared. F-22 pilots were the best of the best, the top 1% of all aviators on the planet. "You flew the Raptor," Captain Davies whispered, as if saying a prayer. Leah nodded. "Lead pilot for the third wing." As they neared the airport's presumed location, Davies made a last-ditch effort. He switched to the 121.5 emergency guard frequency and began broadcasting blindly. "Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is Flight 815. We are a heavy aircraft with total systems failure approaching Cambria County Airport from the east." For a long, agonizing minute, there was only the hiss of static. Then a voice, faint but clear, broke through. "Unidentified aircraft, this is Allegheny Approach. We read you faint but clear. State your intentions." Davies rapidly explained their impossible situation. The controller's voice came back, laced with disbelief. "Flight 815, confirm you are without any electronic navigation?" "That is confirmed," Davies said. "We are on manual control, navigating visually." "Copy that, 815. How are you navigating visually in this weather?" Leah took the microphone from his hand. "Allegheny Approach. This is the acting navigator on Flight 815. We are currently 40 miles out, altitude 12,000 feet, on a direct course for runway 24. There was a pause. "Copy 8115. We are scrambling emergency crews. Who is your navigator?" Leah hesitated. For decades, her identity had been a closely guarded secret. But now, with 312 lives in her hands, there was no room for secrecy. "Allegheny Approach. Call sign Spectre." The radio went dead. The silence that followed was more terrifying than the chaos that had come before. Then the controller's voice returned, but it was completely different. It was filled with a reverence that bordered on shock. "Spectre? Did you say call sign Spectre?" "Confirmed," Leah replied, her voice flat. "Stand by, Flight 815. They could hear the controller speaking urgently to someone else, the words muffled. Captain Davies and his first officer looked at Leah, their faces a canvas of confusion. "What's Spectre?" Davies asked. Leah sighed. "It was my call. Sign." "But why did he react like that?" the first officer wondered. Before she could answer, a new voice boomed over the radio, crisp and authoritative. "Flight 815. This is Colonel Jackson from the 171st Air Refueling Wing. Ma'am, am I speaking to Colonel Leah Vance?" Leah took a deep breath. The past she had tried so hard to leave behind was catching up to her at 200 miles per hour. "Confirmed, Colonel. Retired." "Ma'am," the voice on the radio said, the formality unable to hide the excitement, "it is a profound honor. Allegheny Approach, did you hear that? That's Spectre, the Spectre. Meanwhile, back in the cabin, the passengers who had mocked her were now huddled together, praying for a miracle, completely unaware that their only hope was the very woman they had scorned. "What is going on?" Captain Davies demanded. "Why does everyone know that name?" Leah looked uncomfortable. "It's a long story. Let's just land this plane." But Colonel Jackson was already briefing the controllers. "Approach, you need to understand who you have on that plane. Colonel Vance is a living legend." The first officer couldn't take it anymore. "Ma'am, with all due respect, who are you?" "I was a pilot," Leah said, trying to deflect. "But why are they calling you a legend?" "Flight 815, Colonel Jackson's voice cut in again. "Spectre, my controllers are asking about the Kandahar extraction. They're saying it's required reading at the academy now." Leah closed her eyes. "Colonel, that mission is classified." "Ma'am, it was declassified 3 years ago. The story is famous." Captain Davies stared at her. "What was the Kandahar extraction?" Leah was silent for a long moment, the hum of the wind over the fuselage the only sound. Finally she spoke, her voice low. 7 years ago, a team of Navy SEALs was trapped and surrounded deep in enemy territory. The area was saturated with next-generation surface-to-air missile systems. No rescue attempt was survivable. "So what did you do?" the first officer asked, his voice barely a whisper. "She went in," Colonel Jackson's voice supplied over the radio, full of pride. "She went in alone, in the dead of night, in an experimental stealth fighter, flew under their radar, through a valley they called Missile Alley, took out 3 SAM sites, and guided the extraction helicopters to the team's location. She saved all 14 of them." "You flew alone into that?" Captain Davies asked, his voice thick with disbelief. "It was the only way," Leah said simply. "A larger force would have been detected." "Ma'am, her actions that night earned her the Air Force Cross," the colonel added. The Air Force Cross. The two pilots exchanged a look of pure astonishment. It was the second highest award for valor in combat. As they lined up for their final approach, more pieces of her story emerged, with Colonel Jackson acting as an impromptu narrator. "Spectre, is it true you once took on 4 hostile MiGs over the Persian Gulf and won?" "That's classified, Colonel." "Not anymore, ma'am. We use your gun camera footage to train new pilots now. You have your own YouTube fan club." Captain Davies and his first officer just stared at the unassuming woman next to them, the woman in the faded jacket and scuffed boots, and tried to reconcile her with the legend being described over the radio. 4 enemy planes?" Davies whispered. "It was a busy day," was all Leah said. As the runway lights of Cambria County Airport appeared through the clouds, Leah took command. "Captain, I recommend a steep approach to bleed-off speed. Keep your nose down. We'll flare just before the threshold." She guided him with calm, precise instructions, her voice never wavering. Despite the lack of any electronic aids, she brought the massive Airbus down as gently as a feather. The tires screeched as they hit the tarmac, and the plane rolled to a safe stop, surrounded by flashing lights of fire trucks and ambulances. The passengers erupted in cheers, applause, and sobs of relief. In the cockpit, Captain Davies turned to Leah, his eyes wet with tears. "Colonel, thank you." "You did the flying, Captain," Leah said, already gathering her things. "I just pointed the way." When the stairs were connected and the doors opened, the first-class passengers sat in stunned, horrified silence. They had spent hours mocking and belittling one of the greatest combat pilots of the modern era. Evelyn Sinclair, who had called her clothes an ensemble, realized she had been sitting next to a genuine American hero. Harrison Cole, who had sneered about her getting a lucky break, understood he had insulted a woman whose quiet courage dwarfed his loudest boasts. Dr. Croft and Marcus Thorne, who had complained about falling standards, were confronted by a standard of excellence so far beyond them it was incomprehensible. Chloe, the flight attendant who had served her an economy meal, felt a wave of shame so profound it made her physically ill. As Leah walked down the aisle to deplane, Several of them tried to apologize. "Colonel Vance," Mrs. Sinclair began, her voice trembling, "I am so terribly sorry. I had no idea." Leah stopped and looked at her, her gray eyes cold as steel. "Mrs. Sinclair, the problem isn't that you didn't know who I was. The problem is how you treated me when you thought I was a nobody. That says everything about you and nothing about me." The story of Flight 815 and the mysterious hero Spectre became an international phenomenon. Once Leah's identity was confirmed, the passengers who had tormented her were exposed. Harrison Cole's real estate firm was crippled as partners and investors pulled out, disgusted by his behavior. Evelyn Sinclair was ostracized from her elite social circles, becoming a pariah overnight. Dr. Croft's prestigious hospital placed him on indefinite leave, and Marcus Thorne's law firm forced him into early retirement to avoid the public relations nightmare. Chloe was fired. But Leah took no joy in their ruin. Her only public comment was a simple statement: "I hope this becomes a lesson in treating everyone with dignity." 3 months later, a letter arrived at Leah's small ranch in Wyoming. It was from Chloe. "Dear Colonel Vance," it read, "not a day goes by that I don't think about that flight. My behavior was inexcusable. I judged you based on what you wore, and it was the biggest mistake of my life. Your quiet strength in the face of our arrogance taught me a lesson I will never forget. I'm no longer flying, but I'm volunteering at a local veterans center. I started a program there called the 12A Protocol, teaching people to look past the surface because you never know who you're really talking to." Leah folded the letter and smiled. The world might remember her as Spectre, the legendary pilot, but maybe, just maybe, this was her most important mission. Today, Leah Vance lives a quiet life. She teaches young pilots at a local airstrip, her students having no clue about her past unless they happen to see the faded Air Force Cross tattoo on her wrist. She teaches them about aerodynamics and weather patterns, but she also teaches them something more important. Heroes don't always wear uniforms, she tells them, as they sit in the cockpit of a small Cessna. Sometimes they wear faded jackets and old boots. Sometimes they're sitting right next to you, quiet and unassuming. Treat every single person you meet with respect because you never, ever know who's in seat 12A. Make sure to subscribe to Skybound Stories and check out our other amazing stories by clicking the videos on your screen right now.